My parents destroyed my first app and handed my investors to my brother. But when my $950 million medical software platform hit the news, Dad texted, "Family dinner. Don't act bigger than us." I walked in with. The notification came through at 7:14 on a Tuesday morning. I was standing at the coffee machine in my office, watching the drip hit the carafe, when my phone lit up with 17 messages in 4 minutes. Kira had forwarded the article first. Medcore platform valued at $950 million in Series D round. My name was in the second paragraph. I read it twice, set my phone on the counter, and finished making my coffee. My hands were steady. I had been building this for 5 years, and the first version had died in my parents' living room. I never told anyone why. The messages kept coming through lunch. 2 colleagues stopped at my desk before 10, both holding their phones up like they were showing me a winning ticket. I thanked them, said we still had a product roadmap to finish, and pulled my chair closer to my monitor. By noon, a board member called to discuss the funding round's implications for our hospital partnership pipeline. I walked him through the numbers for 20 minutes and hung up. Then a second board member called with the same questions. I walked her through the same numbers. A reporter from a health technology publication left a voicemail asking for 30 minutes of my time. I did not return the call. At 2 o'clock, I closed my office door and sat in the quiet. The valuation was just a number. It meant investors believed in the platform. It meant hospitals would keep signing contracts. It meant the 41 engineers on my team had built something the market wanted badly enough to put a figure on it that made the news. But $950 million did not undo what happened in March of 2021. 2 investors had committed $90,000 each, $180,000 total, to fund my first health record app. I was 26, working out of a studio apartment with a folding table for a desk, running a prototype that 3 hospital directors had tested and sent me feedback on. Real feedback, line item notes about what worked and what needed fixing. Feedback that made investors take notice. The funding was supposed to close in April. Dad had asked me to present the concept at a family dinner in February. He said he wanted to understand what I was building. I brought my laptop, showed the prototype, walked the table through how the software tracked patient medication schedules and flagged conflicts in real time. Dad nodded. Lance took notes on his phone. I thought it was support. Both investors called the same week in March to say they were going in a different direction. No real explanation. No specific concern, just gone. Within a month, the money appeared in Lance's account for an appointment booking tool he pitched to the same investors at a dinner Gene organized. I watched my company disappear and Lance's appear in the same season. I did not know exactly how it happened. I just knew that the 2 people who had shaken my hand and tested my prototype and told me they believed in it had suddenly and simultaneously changed their minds. I kept sending the checks because it was simpler than the conversation. $50,000 a year to avoid 1 phone call. $24,000 for Dad's supplemental insurance because his retirement coverage had a gap that would have cost him his prescription plan. $3,000 a month for Lance's rent because after his app folded in 14 months, he moved into an apartment he could not cover on his SaaS sales salary of $44,000. $700 a month for Mom's car payment because she drove a sedan she bought the year I started Medcore, and somehow my name ended up on the financing. $50,400 a year total. People would ask later why I kept paying. The answer was simple. I was building a $950 million platform, and $50,000 bought their silence. It was the cheapest way to keep them out of my life while I worked. A peace tax, and their free trial had just expired. Instead, I set up auto transfers and stopped going to dinners. As long as I kept paying, nobody asked questions. Nobody called. 2 days later, on Thursday evening, my phone buzzed with a name I had not seen in 8 months. Dad. 1 text, family dinner Sunday. Don't act bigger than us. I read it standing at my kitchen counter with a half-eaten bowl of rice in front of me. The overhead light hummed. 8 months since the October cookout where Jean had stood at the grill and told a cousin that Lance was the entrepreneurial one in the family, while I stood 6 feet away holding a plate of burgers I had paid for, because I always paid for the food at these things. 8 months since I walked out of that backyard mid-sentence and did not come back. I stopped going to birthdays, stopped answering the family group chat, stopped picking up Clara's calls, which came every 2 weeks on Sundays and always started with "your father would like you to come by," as though Jean was incapable of making his own phone calls. I kept the auto transfers running because cutting them off would have started a fight I was not ready for. $50,400 a year bought me silence, and some months silence was worth the price. And now, 2 days after $950 million, Jean had picked up his phone for the first time in 8 months and typed 6 words that told me everything about why he wanted me at that table. Don't act bigger than us, not congratulations, not we are proud of you, not even call me, a command, a correction. A father telling his daughter to shrink back down to the size he was comfortable with. I set the phone face down on the granite and pressed my thumb into the keychain in my jacket pocket, running it along the scratch surface. Small, brushed silver, worn smooth on one side from years of being gripped through fabric. A caduceus. My computer science professor, Dr. Liang, had handed it to me after my final capstone presentation during senior year, the day I told him I wanted to build software for hospitals. "Keep this where you can feel it," he said. Patient first, always, the keychain had been in my right pocket the night the investors called to say they were pulling out. 5 years later, it was still there. Different jacket, same pocket, same weight against my fingers. I picked up the phone and called Kira. She answered on the second ring, which meant she was still at the office. "He wants a family dinner." "Sunday?" "Sunday," he texted. "First time in 8 months." What did it say? "Don't act bigger than us." Kira was quiet for a moment. I could hear her keyboard stop. "That is the whole message? That is the whole message. Are you going?" I looked at the text again. "Don't act bigger than us." 6 words from a man who had not spoken to me since October, sent 2 days after a number he had nothing to do with made the news. I have not decided yet. I had already decided. Saturday morning. I pulled the printed emails from my desk drawer and slid them into a manila folder. The jacket I chose was the one I had not worn since October, since the cookout I left after 40 minutes. I held it for a moment before putting it on. The sleeves still smelled faintly like citronella from that backyard. I zipped the bag with the folder inside, set it by the front door, and went to bed at 9. The alarm was set for 6. If you have been following Karma Unfolded, you know that some dinners are invitations and some are summons. This was a summons. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss what happened next. The emails arrived the day before Dad's text. Wednesday afternoon, Kira walked into my office without knocking, which she only did when something needed my attention immediately. Someone named Barton Webb emailed the company inbox. "He says he knows you." She set her laptop on the table and turned it toward me. The subject line says, "I owe you an apology." "Do you want me to open it?" "Open it." I knew the name. Barton Webb had been one of the 2 angel investors. The one who had shaken my hand at a coffee shop in February of 2021 and told me my prototype was the most functional early-stage product he had seen that year. He committed $90,000 on the spot. The second investor, a woman named Patricia No, whom I had met through a health tech networking event, committed the same amount 2 weeks later, $180,000 total. Enough to hire 2 developers and rent server space and run for a year. Both of them pulled out in the same week in March. Barton was the one who called me on a Tuesday night at 9 p.m. to say he was sorry, that he had reconsidered, that he thought the market was not ready. He sounded rehearsed. I remember sitting on my studio apartment floor with the phone pressed against my ear, staring at the prototype on my laptop screen, the cursor still blinking on a line of code I had been debugging when the call came in. Kira and I went to the conference room. I opened the email on the wall screen. Barton's message was 4 paragraphs, written in the plain language of a man who had been rehearsing this for years and had finally decided to send it. He had seen the $950 million headline that morning. He had spent 5 years carrying what he called a decision I cannot undo. He invested his share in Lance's company based on Gene's personal recommendation. Gene had called him in March of 2021, 2 days after pulling Barton out of my deal, and invited him to a dinner at the house where he introduced Lance as the one with the real business instinct. Lance pitched an appointment booking tool with a slide deck that Barton later realized borrowed 3 screens from the prototype I had shown him weeks earlier. Same layout, same color palette, same patient dashboard wireframe. Lance had sat at that family dinner in February, taken notes on his phone, and used my work as the foundation for his pitch. Barton funded it. Patricia No funded it. 14 months later, the app had 47 paying users and was burning $9,000 a month on server costs the revenue could not justify. Both investors lost everything. $180,000 gone, invested in a product built on stolen concepts and a father's lie. "I should have funded you," Barton wrote. "Your father told me something about you that I believed without checking. I have carried that for 5 years. I am forwarding the original emails." 2 forwarded messages sat at the bottom of Barton's email, both sent by Gene Russo on March 14, 2021, both to different investors. Both with the same core line, word for word, "She is emotionally unstable. Back my son. He has the business sense." I read the sentence 3 times. "She is emotionally unstable." My father had typed those 4 words into an email and sent them to 2 people who held my company's future in their hands. He did not say I was inexperienced. He did not say the market was risky. He said I was unstable. He used a word that, applied to a 26-year-old woman in technology, carries a specific weight, and he paired it with a recommendation for Lance, his son, the one with the business sense, whose business burned through $180,000 and closed before its 2nd birthday. Same day, same language, 2 emails, 2 investors, 1 coordinated campaign. Dad had not just helped Lance get funding. He had destroyed my credibility by name to make it happen. Kira was sitting across from me. She had read both emails on her laptop while I read them on the screen. She closed the lid slowly and said nothing. I counted the silence. 5 seconds. The conference room air conditioning cycled on. "How long have you known," Kira asked, "that the investors pulled out?" 5 years. That my father was the reason? About 4 minutes. And the dinner is Sunday. Sunday, she opened the laptop again, looked at the email one more time, and closed it. "Print 3 copies. 1 for the dinner. 1 for March. 1 for your desk." She did not say she was sorry. She did not say it was terrible. She gave me a next step. That was why she was my COO, and that was why I trusted her with everything I had built. Kira had been with Medcore since month 4. She answered a job posting I put on a health tech forum when I could not afford to post it on a real hiring site. She showed up to the interview in a rented office that still had the previous tenant's calendar on the wall, looked at the whiteboard full of hospital names that had not returned our calls, and said, "How many of these have you actually demoed for?" When I told her 7, she said, "We are going to demo for all of them. Start at the top." She never asked me why I was building Medcore alone. She never asked me what happened to the first company. She asked about the product. She asked about the roadmap. She asked about the next hospital contract and the one after that. And when the moment finally came to look at the emails that explained why my first company died, she did not offer sympathy. She offered a next step: print 3 copies, talk to counsel, prepare for Sunday. That was Kira. She processed problems the way an engineer processes a bug report. Identify, isolate, fix. I printed the emails on the office printer while Kira went back to her desk. The keychain sat next to the paper tray where I had set it that morning after finding it in my jacket pocket during the commute. The scratched silver caught the overhead light. Dr. Leong had given it to me after my capstone, the day he said, "You are going to build things that keep people alive." I had been carrying it the night Dad made those calls. The keychain was in my pocket the night my first company died, and the night the second one started to breathe. Friday morning, I sat across from March in her office on the 4th floor of a building 2 blocks from Medcore. March was my corporate counsel. She read contracts the way I read code, clause by clause, flagging dependencies and edge cases before they became problems. She took the printed emails from me, set them side by side on her desk, and read them in silence for 12 minutes. I watched her pen move. She underlined emotionally unstable in both emails and drew a line connecting them. Her assessment, tortious interference. Jean had intentionally and knowingly interfered with my established business relationships by making false statements about my mental fitness to 2 separate investors on the same day. The cause of action was textbook. The problem was time. 5 years. In most jurisdictions, the statute of limitations for tortious interference runs between 2 and 4 years, which meant a direct lawsuit would face an uphill procedural fight before it ever reached the merits. But these emails do something else for you, March said. She tapped the printout. They establish a documented pattern. Your father lied about your competence to redirect capital to your brother. Your brother benefited directly. If your brother is currently making public claims about contributing to Medcore, those claims are separately actionable under the Lanham Act. False designation of origin. That is a live claim with no statute problem. She looked up. Is your brother making public claims? He updated his LinkedIn 2 weeks ago, listed himself as co-architect of Medcore platform. March pulled it up on her screen. She read the tagline, printed a screenshot, and stapled it to the email copies. I will have a cease and desist drafted by end of day. When do you want it sent? After Sunday. After the dinner. After the dinner. She nodded once. Then we send it Monday or Tuesday. He receives it while the conversation is still fresh. She set her pen down. Vivian, the tortious interference claim may be time-barred, but these emails are proof of what your father did. That does not expire. Use them however you need to. I drove home Friday evening with 3 copies of the emails in my bag. 1 for the dinner, 1 in March's file, 1 on my desk. I did not feel angry. I felt like someone who had been handed the receipts for a fire she already knew was arson. Sunday evening, 5:30. Early June, warm enough that the air pressed against my arms when I stepped out of the car. I pulled up to my parents' house and parked on the street, 2 houses down. Through the side gate I could see the setup, 2 folding tables pushed together end to end, covered in plastic tablecloths that Clara had clipped down with binder clips because the evening breeze kept lifting the corners. Tiki torches staked into the lawn at 4-foot intervals, citronella candles on the railing. About 12 relatives were already seated or standing with plates. Jean sat at the head of the far table with a beer in his right hand and his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, talking to an uncle I had not seen since Christmas 2 years ago. Clara stood in the kitchen doorway holding a casserole dish, watching the patio through the screen door. I walked in through the side gate carrying my bag. An aunt I had not seen since October crossed the patio and hugged me before I had taken 3 steps. She smelled like perfume and bug spray. A cousin shook my hand and held it an extra second. Vivian, congratulations, we are all so proud. Thank you, we have a good team. Nobody mentioned the article by name or said the number out loud. They said things like, we saw the news and you must be so busy and how is the company doing? I answered each one with the same sentence, we are doing well, thank you. I could feel Jean watching me from the head table as I moved through the small conversations, tracking who I talked to, how long I stayed, whether I smiled enough. Lance was seated at the far table, 2 chairs down from Jean, with a plate of food and a can of soda. He looked up when I walked in and raised his hand in a half wave. "Hey, Viv." "Hey, Lance." He went back to his plate. His wife sat across from him, talking to an aunt. He looked smaller than I remembered, thinner in the face. His polo shirt had a logo on the chest from a software conference he had not attended. The company gave out free shirts at trade shows. I sat down at the near end of the second table, set my bag on the ground between my feet, and accepted a plate of food Clara brought over. She set it down and touched my shoulder. "It is good to have you here," she said. Her voice was tight. "Thank you, Mom." She went back to the kitchen. The plate had 2 scoops of casserole and a dinner roll. I picked up my fork. Jean stood. He tapped his beer bottle with a fork. The 2 tables went quiet. "I want to say something before we eat." He looked around the patio, making eye contact with relatives one at a time. He skipped me. "This family sticks together. That is how we were raised, and that is what I taught my kids. When one of us succeeds, it belongs to all of us, because we built the foundation. Success does not happen alone." He paused and set his beer down. "I am proud of what this family has produced." Murmurs, a few nods. Jean's brother raised his glass from the far end of the table. An older cousin clapped twice. Clara, still standing in the kitchen doorway, pressed her lips together and watched Jean sit down. She had heard this speech before. Different words, same architecture. We stick together. We built this together. No individual credit. It was the speech of a man who had never built anything himself, claiming ownership of something built by someone else. Jean was mid-sit when a cousin named Dale walked over to my end of the table. He leaned down and held his phone out at an angle, screen facing me. "Hey, congrats to you and Lance. He told me he helped design the platform. Pretty cool that it is a family thing." He turned the phone so I could see it clearly. Lance's LinkedIn profile. The header photo was a stock image of a laptop on a desk. Under his name, in the tagline line, "Co-Architect, MedCore Platform." Updated 2 weeks ago, the week after the $950 million article. I stared at the screen. Dale was smiling. He thought he was giving me a compliment. Lance had never written a single line of code for MedCore. He had never been inside our office. He had never met Kira, never seen a product roadmap, never attended a board meeting, never reviewed a hospital contract, never tested a build, never sat in on a call with a client. His company, the one funded by the money Dad stole from my investors, had been an appointment booking tool that 3 competitors already offered at lower price points. It folded in 14 months. $180,000 in investor money gone for 47 paying customers and a product nobody missed when it shut down. Lance spent the next 3 years working in SaaS sales, cold calling dental offices and chiropractic clinics, earning $44,000 a year. And now, 2 weeks after my platform made the news, he had added co-architect to his name on a public professional profile that anyone in the industry could find. I came to this dinner to set a boundary. My plan was simple. Eat, tell Dad that his text was disrespectful and that the next 8 months of silence would become permanent, and drive home. The emails were in my bag as insurance, something to have in case he denied what happened in 2021. I was not planning to read them aloud. I was not planning to make a scene. Kira knew the plan. March knew the plan. The plan was a controlled, private message delivered in person and then a clean exit. Lance's LinkedIn broke the plan open. He was not a passive beneficiary of something that happened 5 years ago. He was actively, right now, today, on a public professional platform, claiming authorship of a company he had never contributed to. The betrayal from 2021 was not behind me. It was sitting at the other end of the table with a plate of Clara's casserole, wearing a polo shirt. telling my cousins he helped design a platform that 41 engineers had built under my direction for 5 years. The boundary conversation was no longer enough. Lance was telling 12 relatives he was co-architect of MedCore, and he was telling other people too. Colleagues, recruiters, anyone who searched his profile. The lie was spreading. I adjusted my plan between one breath and the next. The emails were coming out of the folder. Gene looked at me from the head of the table. He had finished his toast, settled back into his chair, and now his eyes landed on me the way they always did at these events, expectant, proprietary, the look of a man waiting for a daughter to perform gratitude. "Vivian, you want to say something? Thank anyone?" "Not yet." His smile thinned. The beer bottle turned in his hand. "See, this is what I am talking about." He set the bottle down. "You sit in a glass office typing code all day and you think that makes you better than the people who raised you. Your brother had a real business with real customers. You got lucky with timing. Sit down, eat your food, and stop acting like a stranger who showed up to collect praise." 12 people heard it. The aunt who had hugged me at the gate set her fork on her plate without finishing her bite. Dale looked down at his phone, then at the table. Lance's wife, seated across from him, picked up her water glass and held it without drinking. An uncle at the far end of the table exhaled through his nose and leaned back. I gripped the edge of the folding table with both hands. The metal was warm from the sun. I held it for 3 seconds, felt the ridge dig into my palms, let go. I was done absorbing. If you have ever watched someone take credit for your work in front of the people you grew up with, you know what that clarity feels like. Stay with this story on Karma Unfolded, because what happened in the next 10 minutes made every person at those tables set down their fork. I stood up. The folding chair scraped against the patio concrete. I reached under the table, pulled the manila folder from my bag, and set it on the plastic tablecloth in front of me. Then I took the keychain from my jacket pocket and placed it on the table next to the folder. The scratched silver caught the light from the nearest tiki torch. I took the phone from Dale's hand and set it flat in the center of the table, screen still bright. "Co-architect," I read aloud. The table went quiet. Dale's smile disappeared. "Lance, what code did you write for MedCore?" He swallowed. Wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "I gave you design input early on, Vivian. We had conversations about the layout and the user flow, and I had ideas about the patient dashboard. You know that. Name one module." His eyes moved from me to Gene and back. He spread his hands flat on the table. One function. Nothing. His mouth opened, then closed. One line of code. Lance, 5 years of development. 41 engineers. 800,000 lines of code in production. Name one that you wrote. Silence. An uncle across from Lance leaned back in his chair and folded his arms. Lance's wife turned her head 2 inches toward him and held it there. I opened the manila folder and placed the 3 printed pages on the table, fanning them out so the headers were visible. Each printout had a yellow highlight across the same sentence. These are emails from a man named Barton Webb. In 2021, he committed $90,000 to fund my first health record app. He lost every dollar of that money because Dad called him and told him to invest in Lance instead. I looked at Gene. Dad sent these emails on March 14th, 2021. 2 of them. Same day. Same wording. 2 different investors. A cousin seated near Gene reached across the table and picked up the nearest printout. He tilted it toward the torchlight and started reading. His wife leaned over his shoulder. I did not wait for him to finish. I read the highlighted line aloud, slowly, so that every person at both tables could hear it. She is emotionally unstable. Back my son. He has the business sense. The sentence landed on the patio like a plate breaking. Gene's expression changed. His eyes moved from my face to the printout in his nephew's hands. His mouth opened a fraction, and he pulled his reading glasses off his forehead and held them in his fist. You sent that to 2 investors on the same day. word for word. You told two people who were about to fund my company that I was emotionally unstable, so they would move their money to Lance. That is tortious interference. That is what it is called when you sabotage someone's business relationships on purpose. Gene pushed his chair back. The metal feet scraped on the concrete. Vivian, I was trying to protect this family from a bad investment. You were 26 years old, you had no business experience, and I made a judgment call. That is what fathers do. You called me unstable. I was being honest with people who were about to hand their money to someone who was not ready. Barton lost $90,000 on Lance's app. Patricia lost $90,000. $180,000 gone in 14 months. 47 customers. That was the business you called real. Gene looked down the table at Lance. Lance was staring at the plastic tablecloth. His wife had set her glass down and was sitting with her hands in her lap, looking at the side of his face. That is ancient history, Gene said. His voice had shifted from defensive to instructional, the tone he used when he was telling you how things were going to be. Lance made a mistake. He learned from it. He has been working hard for 3 years. And what matters now is that this family supports each other going forward. The aunt across from Gene looked at him and then looked at the email printout still sitting on the table in front of the cousin. She did not pick up her fork. Supports each other. I let the phrase sit for a moment. Dale walked up to me 10 minutes ago and congratulated both me and Lance. He showed me Lance's LinkedIn on his phone. Lance updated his profile 2 weeks ago, the day after the valuation article ran. He listed himself as co-architect of Medcore platform. He told people at this table, people in this family, that he helped design a platform he has never touched. I looked at Lance. You have never written one line of code for Medcore. You have never been inside the office. You have never met my COO. You have never read a contract, reviewed a build, sat in on a board call, or spoken to a single one of our hospital clients. And 2 weeks ago, you put co-architect next to your name on a public professional profile where anyone in my industry can see it. Lance lifted his head. His face was blotched red along the jawline. I was just trying to, we are family, Vivian, and I thought I contributed in spirit, I supported the idea early on, and you contributed a LinkedIn update. That is what you contributed. Lance's wife spoke for the first time. Her voice was low, directed at Lance, but the table heard it. You told me you consulted on the platform. Lance shook his head. It was more like general advice. I talked to Vivian about what hospitals need and name one hospital, I said. He stopped talking. The cousin holding the printout set it down on the table next to his plate. He looked at Gene for 2 seconds, then looked away and pushed his chair back 6 inches from the table. He crossed his arms and did not speak. The aunt, who had set her fork down earlier, lifted her napkin from her lap, folded it once, and placed it beside her plate. She pushed her chair back too. Lance's wife turned her whole body toward Lance and kept it there, her eyes on his profile, and he did not turn to meet her. She reached behind her chair, pulled her purse off the backrest, and set it in her lap. She had not stood up. She had not said another word. But everyone at that table understood that she was already gone. Gene leaned forward. His voice had dropped to the register he used when he was trying to sound reasonable, the voice of a father explaining something to a child who did not understand the full picture. Vivian, I am your father. I have made mistakes. Every parent makes mistakes. But everything I have done because I believed it was right for this family. You cannot come in here after 8 months of silence and tear everything apart because of 2 emails from 5 years ago. I did not tear anything apart. I kept my voice level. You texted me on Thursday. Don't act bigger than us. I am not acting, Dad. I am bigger than you. You called me unstable, and I built something worth $950 million while you were collecting my checks. You wrote the emails. You pressed send twice to two different people. The tearing happened in 2021. I am showing the room what it looked like. He looked at the printout on the table. He looked at the aunt with her napkin folded. He looked at his nephew with his arms crossed. He looked at Lance, who had not spoken in over a minute and was staring at a spot on the tablecloth 3 inches in front of his plate. You called me unstable. Lance burned their money in 14 months. I built $950 million in 5 years. One founder. 4 sentences. No heat. Each one a fact. I let them sit on the table next to the printouts and the uneaten food and the tiki torch smoke. Gene's fork slid off the edge of his plate and hit the table with a sharp clink that cut through every other sound on the patio. His jaw worked side to side, the muscles in his cheeks pulling and releasing, but nothing came out. His hands slid off the table and disappeared under it. He sat in his chair and breathed through his nose with his eyes on the tablecloth. He did not stand up. He did not reach for the printouts. 4 seconds of silence. Then the dog on the next block barked. Every payment I make for this family stops Monday. Insurance, rent, car. You can call me ungrateful. I call it finished. I pushed my chair back, left the printed emails where they were, 3 pages, fanned out, highlighted sentence visible, sitting on a plastic tablecloth between a plate of untouched casserole and an empty beer bottle. Let them read every word. Let them read it twice. I walked toward the back gate. My steps were steady. My eyes stayed on the latch. Lance, the cousin with his arms crossed, the aunt with her napkin folded, all of them sat behind me. I kept walking. Clara caught me 3 steps from the latch. She had followed me off the patio, still wearing her oven mitts, one hand pulling at the edge of her apron. Her face was flushed, and the skin around her eyes was pulled tight. "Vivian, please, he is your father. He made a mistake. You cannot just walk out. Come back inside, and we can talk about this." A mistake. She called 5 years of deliberate sabotage and 3 weeks of credit theft a mistake. She was asking me to walk back to that table and pretend this was something a family could talk through over dessert. I stopped at the gate. The metal was warm under my hand. I turned. "Did you know he called me unstable?" Her lips parted. She looked at the ground between us, 4 feet of patio concrete and 1 step down to the grass. Then at my face. Then at the ground again. Her left hand released the apron fabric and hung at her side. A moth circled the porch light above her head. She did not answer. I opened the gate. "Your car payment clears on the 15th, Clara. You might want to check your balance." I walked through it and closed it behind me. The latch clicked. I walked to my car 2 houses down, started the engine and pulled away from the curb. In the rearview mirror, I could see the side gate. Nobody came through it. The tiki torches were still burning. Monday morning, 7:15. I sat at my desk with a cup of coffee that Kira had already made and opened my banking app. 3 recurring auto transfers. I canceled Gene's supplemental insurance first. $24,000 a year. Gone, then Lance's rent. $3,000 a month. $18,000 a year. Gone, then Clara's car payment. $700 a month. $8,400 a year. Gone, 3 taps. $50,400 a year. Canceled. I screenshotted the confirmation pages, forwarded them to March's secure email, and set my phone on the desk. I picked up the coffee. It was still warm. The following week, a journalist from MedTech Review contacted Kira about a profile piece on MedCore's founding story. We sat in the conference room for an hour. She asked how the company started. I told her the truth. 1 person, 1 laptop. A studio apartment in a city where I did not know anyone. A prototype that 3 hospital directors believed in when nobody else would return my calls. The article ran the following Friday. One line mattered more than anything else in the piece. Medcore was built by one person, from one laptop, in a studio apartment after her first startup was derailed by family interference. Lance's co-architect, Medcore Platform, claimed disappeared from LinkedIn the same day the article published. March's cease and desist letter, citing potential Lanham Act liability for false designation of origin, had arrived at Lance's apartment 3 days earlier. He removed the claim within 48 hours. His LinkedIn tagline now read SaaS account executive, which was true. What was also true was that 2 of his connections had already tagged him in the Medcore article's comment section. Asking why the founder's story made no mention of him, he turned his comments off. Thursday of that week. One voicemail from Jean. I saw the notification in the Medcore parking garage, sitting in my car with the engine off and my bag on the passenger seat. I played it. His voice, Vivian, I was trying to protect the family from 8 seconds of breathing. The kind of breathing where someone is holding the phone away from their face because they cannot control the sound. He hung up. He never said the word. Not sorry, not wrong, not even please. He started a sentence he could not finish because finishing it would have meant admitting that what he did was not protection. It was sabotage. And he was not ready to say that out loud, even to a voicemail he knew I might not play. I deleted it and drove to the office. Jean's kitchen table, the same oak surface where he had served Thanksgiving for 30 years and toasted family unity 6 days earlier, now held one of the printed emails face down beside a stack of mail. Clara's car payment overdue notice sat on top. A grocery list in her handwriting. The patio chairs from Sunday were still outside, unfolded, spotted with morning dew. Nobody had put them away. Lance had stopped answering Jean's calls. He was not angry about the sabotage. He was angry that it came out at a table full of relatives who now looked at him differently. Jean sat in the kitchen alone and called a daughter who did not pick up. And when the voicemail beeped, he could not finish the sentence. If this story made you feel something, subscribe to Karma Unfolded and leave a comment telling me whether you would have gone to that dinner. Every subscription helps this channel keep telling stories like this one. The following Tuesday morning, I walked into my office at 7:20. Kira had left a sticky note on my monitor. Board call moved to 2. Coffee is fresh. My laptop was open to 63 unread messages, partnership inquiries, hospital contract renewals, a request from a medical school to use our platform in their clinical training curriculum, 3 interview requests from publications I had never heard of, a note from Barton Webb. I watched the article. You did it right. The keychain sat on the left side of my desk next to the laptop where it had been since the morning I printed the emails. My hand rested on the desk beside it, palm flat, fingers open. No grip, no pressure. Dr. Liang was right. You build things that keep people alive. And sometimes you have to let the dead weight go. I opened my inbox and started reading. Morning light came through the window and landed on the scratched silver.